Welcome to the On Stage podcast, where we interview musicians and members of the entertainment community. Hello, everyone. Thank you for watching this podcast. As you notice, my guest today has the same hat as I do. Don't worry, he's not in the same room. But we're wearing almost the same type of shirt.
Yep.
Well, we have Mike Vaccaro, is a freelance musician in Greater Los Angeles, California. He's active in the fields of motion pictures, television, jingles, live theater, and classical jazz and pop concerts. And he performs on a multitude of woodwind instruments, including the clarinet, the flute, the saxophone, and oboe families. His background and current performance activities are varied. Now, Mike, can you give us a little bit of background of who Mike Vaccaro is and whatever got you into music?
Well, what got me into music was I heard, in fourth grade, I heard the junior high school band, and I said, well, I have to do that. And then I went up, to get my instrument, I wanted to play trumpet. And the guy says, well, we got too many trumpet players. You got to play clarinet. And I was pretty bugged about it, but it turned out to be perfect because, we all have a psychology of, like a trumpet player's got a different psychology than a clarinet player, right? They have too many rests, so they talk about everybody else, and so it turns out that the clarinet was a perfect thing for me. And then early in the high school, I went to saxophone. Late in high school, I went to the flute. After I was living in Las Vegas for a couple of years, I went to the oboe, and that kind of solidified my place in the business because there's very few doublers that play oboe.
What was the first instrument that you picked up that you started learning to play before you decided, oh, I like this. Let's see what the next one is I can try out. And then you started the flute, the saxophone, all the oboes. So is there any end to instruments that you like? The drums? Do you know how to play the drums as well?
No. The young guys are so good at so many things now because they have better educations than we did. I mean, there was not even a jazz band when I grew up. We had to make that happen in college, and none of the teachers knew anything about it, so they didn't want to teach it. So we'd have the jazz band at 5 in the afternoon between the day classes and the night classes, so we wouldn't get caught. And then finally, we won a jazz festival, and they had to pay attention to us. So they had to hire some teachers that knew about jazz and that kind of stuff. But I think to your first question, when I really knew what I was going to do for a living, it was right after I picked up the saxophone. I was at Disneyland and I heard Count Basie's band. I was sitting right in the front row and I'm listening, and the band sounded so great. It was one of his best bands.
Wow.
I just thought to myself, I'm going to do that for a living. So I got serious about practicing. Instead of 2 days before the lesson, I practiced the whole week.
And now you're good at it.
I think so. But there's a lot of good young guys now. I mean, the standard has come way up since I started.
Yeah, I notice you playing in these symphonies and playing gorgeous music. And tell us more about that. How did you end up finding yourself in a symphony? And do you choose the players you want to usually play with, or I just want to go in there and start playing with people? Do you have a preference of who or what instrument you'd be?
I have no preferences whatsoever. I like it all. I just love music. But I like to say that I'm a classical musician that plays jazz and pop. It's not the other way around. I'm not a jazz player that can play classical music because I was trained as a classical player. And the jazz I learned on my own. I had 1 week where I was a soloist with the Cal State Long Beach Orchestra with a piece by Darius Milhaud, one of the French Five. It's called the Scaramouche for saxophone, very classical. And 6 weeks later, I was with the Stan Kenton band. So I had to learn how to play jazz.
So is it just jazz that you learned, or what about pop or classical?
Yeah, jazz and pop are kind of the same. It's just you don't play as many notes. You try and play more melodies, and in fact, even my jazz, I'm not a fast note player. I don't like to play fast. I like to make the solo part of the melody.
When there's a certain classical piece or a piece of music you want to play, do you say, "Oh, that's the flute," or "Oh no, this is a saxophone piece," or do you just so you know what, and you just that one? How do you make your choice to what you want to
The
play?
classical pieces are written for an instrument. I mean, there's a
Okay.
literature. You know, pop music, there is no literature per se. I mean, like you could go in and say, well, I think saxophone would be better for that, or flute would be better for that, and they kind of trust you because they think you know what you're doing. But in classical, it's very, very strict. That's the difference between pop and jazz and classical. It's the strictness that's involved.
Do you like to play covers for like pop music? Like, would you dare to learn how to play like a Britney Spears cover using an oboe or playing
Yeah,
like Linkin Park on flute or something?
I just did an album and we did a an Adele tune on it,
Oh, nice.
and we did a forget her name. Oh, Bonnie Raitt. We did a Bonnie Raitt tune on it,
Awesome.
and we also did a Benny Goodman tune on it called Goodbye, which was the last piece he played every night when he worked.
So what instrument do you basically like to keep like practice? Is there a particular instrument you just like to have in your hands, or do you prefer just to pick up the oboe, play for 10, 15 minutes, and then pick up the flute and play it? Like, do you have an actual love for one of the instruments, or you just I know you said you like music, but there must be an instrument that you consider to be like your teddy bear musical instrument.
I like that teddy bear. I'll remember that. Well, the thing is flute is the only instrument that you don't stick in your mouth.
Hmm.
It plays out. You play it out here.
Yeah.
So because you don't have to deal with reeds and all that stuff that you have to play, on the other instruments, the flute is enjoyable for that reason. But I mean, I love all my instruments. I love playing. I just love playing. I love learning new stuff. I mean, like you say, like if I had enough time in my life left, I might even learn bassoon. But I'm a little too old for that now.
But I don't understand it. Like I thought if you could learn to play a saxophone, you could play the trumpet, you can play the French horn, you can play
Oh,
the
no,
no.
no. Even going from alto to tenor saxophone, it's a completely different psyche. It's a completely
Oh,
different sound, a completely different approach. And it really, and you plus you have to have the right equipment. Like if I go into a movie session or something on a saxophone, I take four mouthpieces because I don't know whether it's going to be classical, jazz, pop, or what it's going to be. So I have mouthpieces that do all the same. Well, so if you go from one instrument to another instrument, the same thing happens. So you can imagine how many mouthpieces I have sitting in cardboard boxes in my garage.
oh wow,
Yeah. You just keep
wow.
trying until you find the right one. Now, since I started doing that, I learned how to make them. So now I always get the best one of the ones I make. So that makes it easier
Oh
and
wow.
cheaper, a lot
That's a,
cheaper.
that's amazing. You mentioned it earlier that you said that you're retired now. So what were you doing before? Was it all just music? Like were you like a music teacher or
Oh no! Well, I've always been a music teacher. I always have three or four private students because I think we need to give back to the people, because somebody taught us.
yeah.
We need to teach somebody
Hmm.
else, teach them the craft. Uh, but what was the question?
So what were you doing for a living before you retired? Was it music related?
I was a full time musician my whole life after I
Oh,
was 19
really?
years old. Yeah, full time. And it just because I did a lot of things because I did play classical music and I did play jazz music and I did play pop music. There's a lot of like if the classical if there's nothing going on with the Long Beach Opera, I could go into LA and do a session. So that I always had things that I could do, and again because I owned and played an oboe pretty well, that kept me working. So I had a 50 some year career. It was all good.
What? Yeah, I always enjoyed the violin. You ever thought of maybe adding a violin to your repertoire, or is that a pretty difficult instrument for you to play?
Every instrument is difficult.
Hmm.
I mean, they all have their own problems. I mean, violin, you have to be able to go this way and that way at the same time. That's not easy. Trumpet, you have to play high notes, so you got to be an athlete. Piano, you got to be able to play 10 fingers at the same time. I mean, there's just no instrument that's easy. And for me, I think music's a lifetime thing. I'm still learning. You never stop learning, and and I never stop practicing. My rule is to practice 1 minute a day. Now, the 1 minute a day turns into maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours, maybe 3 hours. But if you don't get the 1 minute a day in, you probably shouldn't be in music.
Well, I was going to say that you ever had a worry that you're going to wake up in the morning and forget how to play a certain instrument? Because then you would probably be worried.
Yeah, yeah. You get a lot of worries in playing music. Am I going to lose this? Am I going to get in an accident? Am I going to, like you say, am I going to wake up someday and my flute chops don't work? And flute chops, have to do with how swollen your mouth is too. If I play the flute right now and then I play a hard clarinet for an hour, flute's going to be a lot harder because my mouth has changed completely. I become swollen. So that's why I always practice the flute first.
Yeah, you must be definitely, with the amount of experience you have in music, you probably mentored a lot of famous musicians and up and comers. Is this true?
I've had 2 or 3 musicians that have become professionals. You know,
Nice.
I also was a music contractor at the Cerritos Center for the Performing Arts for 30 years. So I
Oh,
hired
wow.
musicians for all the celebrity acts that came into town.
Oh, wow. I
Yeah,
really,
that was fun.
yeah, I really enjoy that. I want to ask you if you knew, you talked about you play woodwinds. Actually, clarinets, flute, saxophones. Yeah. Let me check to see. We had a gentleman on our podcast, and although he's situated and stationed in New York, his name is Billy Cole, and he owns Cole's Woodwind Shop. And what he does is he fixes flutes and anything like trumpets and tubas. And I asked him, has he ever gotten a flute that was bent like this? And he told me how he was able to repair them and intricacies. And he said that one of the members of the band came in with to have him fix, what's his name, Garth. Can't remember the guy from the band, Garth. Anyway, so he has a lot of stories. So check that out. It's
Well,
actually,
it's funny. There's always the guy that was putting his horn in the back of the car, in the trunk, and somebody said something to him, and he forgot to put it in, and then backed up over it. So
yeah.
there's always that.
And I asked him, how do you know when a flute has been fixed? And he says, well, he does a monochromatic scale and he makes sure that the A's sound like the A's. And it was very, very interesting to talk to. Um, Mike, I'd like to ask you about you're freelance magician. Why did I say magician? Freelance musician in Los Angeles. And with motion pictures and television, can you give us an idea of what motion picture and television show that you actually worked on?
I haven't been on many television shows, but I did all the Pixar movies, and
Hmm.
I did some. What's his name? The guy that was in. What is it? They just redid his movie. He was the jet guy. Um, I don't remember his name. I don't remember half the movies I did because you just go in, you do them, and you leave, and they have the movie on behind you, but you rarely get to watch it because you're playing your instrument. You know. Uh, but no, mostly all of the Pixar movies. I did some. What's a big ape? I did some of those movies.
Did you do Finding Nemo?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay.
No, but it's been. We have these things called the Special Payments Fund. When you do a movie, if they keep selling it, you keep getting money. And fortunately, a lot of the things I did were cartoons. They were adult
Oh,
cartoons, like a Ratatouille and Up and those kind of movies. But boy, they just keep selling. And then the special payments just keep coming in, and I thought that by now that they'd go away, but they're still happily coming.
So
That's
what about,
another, as that goes away.
yeah. So what about the jingles part of it? Like,
I
are you,
hardly ever did a jingle.
oh yeah.
There's only 2 or 3 companies in LA that do jingles. Now, I had a friend that ran a jingle company, and whenever they needed instruments, he would call me.
Mhm.
But a lot of those jingle companies, you gotta almost have to be a composer, because a lot of times they don't know what you should play. So you have to kind of go in and make up the part as you go along. And I'm really not a composer, and I know woodwind players that really are composers and can kind of follow what that is. Or they say, oh, well, instead of doing it on this instrument, do it on that instrument. Well, you have to transpose it, so that's not my deal. So there's so many ways to play that,
Mhm.
that's a funny thing. And so many guys that do, and one of the things about contracting is knowing who does what. I mean, you got 5 clarinet players. Well, who does the job that this particular act needs? So you need to kind of know what everybody does, what their strength is. Everybody in LA, everybody plays good enough, but you want the person that's absolutely right, you know.
I noticed you did live theater as well.
I did a lot of years of live theater. I did that probably the most of my career between opera and the theater. I probably did that 30 years out of the 50.
Wow. Opera. But you never thought of taking up like being like an opera tenor or Italian opera tenor. You just prefer to play music and not.
The learning curve is so long on every instrument you play, or everything, and I never really understood how important singing was until I was 65. Now I make my students sing, and they hate it, because they're worried about what they sound like. But kids are pretty sensitive.
Yeah. I really appreciate that. And the studies at Cerritos College and Cal State University, Long Beach, where you premiered the Scaramouche for alto saxophone. Wow, this is very like you got a lot of accolades here. I love this. Orchestra by Darius Milhaud. Like we're familiar with these people. Stan Kenton, Herman. Wow. And I hope you're still going on with that. I hope you're not just suddenly putting all your woodwind instruments down and saying, okay, I had enough time to stop music, which I know you probably won't. But
And actually, what I'm doing now is recording. I just got done with that jazz pop recording, like where we did the cover tunes, and now I'm
Mhm.
doing a CD of Brahms, the music of Brahms,
Good.
and so I'm constantly recording, and and I just got finished with that book, which was about a 2-year project, 300 pages, and it's going to be on the market in 6 weeks. It'll be on Amazon and Kindle. And I'm glad to have done the last little bit on it today, just before I quit about like 20 minutes before we started. And that was it. I was done. It was like, I'm all jacked up about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like this is amazing. Academy Awards, um, motion pictures like Up, Star Trek, Speed Racer, Ratatouille,
So
Hairspray.
you know more about it than I do.
I do. Mission Impossible. Wow. And you're a music contractor at the Cerritos Center for the Performing Arts, going on in 29th year. Wow,
Actually,
that's
I
a
made 30 years, and I quit when the COVID thing started
yeah.
2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. So I had a pretty good run there. It was a lot of fun too. Plus, there was a great Italian restaurant really near. So every time we worked there between the rehearsal and the show, we all went to the Italian restaurant. That was
Oh wow.
very, very good.
You're making me hungry.
Aroma, man, you got to eat an aroma for sure.
Oh, definitely next time I'm down there. Um, so Star Trek. So this is like a music score that you worked on, or just part of the score with another one, or
The whole score, yeah. They put the score together in 30 to 2 minutes, 30-second to 2 minute, little bits, depending on You know, because there's not music going. It's not like a symphony or something where the music keeps going no matter what. I mean, you do something. The thing is you get one time through, so you get the feel of what it is. The second time, they expect you to play it perfect, and that's a difficulty of doing motion pictures. You know, or TV, which I did not do much TV in my life, uh, and even Broadway shows. You know, you have a little bit more time to learn it, but you know, the first week's like terrifying, and the second week is like boring. And I did Phantom of the Opera for a year once, and boy, talk about the internal dialogue getting loud. Boy,
Wow.
about the 10th week, you don't know what to do with yourself.
Oh, wow. Phantom of the Opera. Oh, it's my favorite.
It's, you know what, the, in general, musicals aren't that much fun to play because the writers don't know what we do as musicians, and sometimes they write things that are impossible or that aren't fun or out of the range of the instrument or something. But whoever orchestrated that really knew what they were doing, so that was fun, you know. And everybody was a great player, and you know, if you have to do a show, that's one of the shows you want to do.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you enjoy doing it, enjoy like doing music and playing music, I wouldn't quit myself. I'd be playing an instrument. I'd be singing till I was 100, 110, because if you enjoy it, keep it up. But I'm kind of interested in that you make mouthpieces for clarinet and saxophone. Can you tell me, do you have like, do you do them in your garage like with a lathe, or what kind of material do you use to create
Well,
the mouthpieces?
mostly we use hard rubber, and there's only two places in the world you can get them now. Get hard rubber in rod rubber form, and that's Germany. They're the only people that are making it good. And yeah, I have lathes in the back there and all kinds of tools. And when we bought this house, uh, we have a three-car garage. I made one of the three-car garages into just a workshop, and it's worked out very nicely. You know, and I teach back there too. I keep everything back there. However, when I record at home or practice, I practice inside the house. I have a practice room inside the house too.
But what I understand is why these mouthpieces are only made with that one particular material, which you can only find in one place.
Well,
Can't you
they
just?
make it with all kinds of materials. I just don't like to work on steel.
All
Uh,
right.
you know, brass, yes, that's okay, but steel is so hard that you ruining all the bits on your you know on your tools, and it's just not fun. You know, they do get a different sound. And I have metal mouthpieces that I used to use on jobs all the time because you never know if they wanted that particular sound. It's an absolutely different sound. You know, so and most pop guys use either a hard rubber mouthpiece that we've changed the inside of the chamber to sound like a metal mouthpiece or a metal mouthpiece. So you know, it's material does make a difference. I had an argument with a guy one time. He says, "Well, he says the material doesn't make a difference." I says, "Well, let's make one out of cement and see." You know, cement
Cement.
they don't play.
No, talk about a little bit of heaviness and weight added on to the
Yeah,
actual.
well, that's the thing. Sometimes the only way you can talk somebody into something is to give them a radical thought. You know, say, "Yeah, let's make it out of cement. See if you're right."
Make it out of gum so that
Yeah,
while you're
make it out
playing, they're chewing. What flavor
of
mouthpiece is that, George? It's spearmint. Oh, okay.
Actually, gum's a pretty useful thing because when you're making a mouthpiece, you can stick the gum inside the mouthpiece in different places and see what it does to the sound. You know, because a mouthpiece is like an aircraft wing, like a plane wing. You know, and depending on the shape of the top of the mouthpiece, that determines how fast the air goes through
Hmm.
and what shape it goes through. So it's a lot of science involved in it.
So
But
you're in.
mine wasn't really science. Mine was trial and error. So
Oh, okay. Now your instruments, you get them at a certain place at the same company, or do you like oh, I want the oboe, I'll get it at this company because they make great oboes. I want to do the flute, I'll get the flute over at this company. Is there a central company you get all your instruments at?
No, I get them every, like there's a place in town that specializes in flutes. There's a place in town that does saxophones. There's a place in town that's best for clarinets. Now they have all the other instruments, but they specialize in that. And if you're going to a repair person, you want to go to the guy that repairs flutes, not the guy that repairs tubas. I mean, it's that technical. I mean, it takes a repairman a long time to learn the craft, just like a musical instrument.
Do you clean your own instruments, or do you send them out to get cleaned?
They should clean them more often, I guess.
I heard from another musician that their trumpet sounds better when it's cleaned. Because there is sort of you can, if you know about, like Rick Bento, for instance, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's been around, and he actually teaches you how to use an ear for your music, so he can tell you whether the instrument sounds good or whether you're actually playing a D or something, but like with the, and how would you need a trained ear over the years in order to know that what you're playing is an E or what you're playing is a B?
Well,
it's just second nature to you?
Pitch. That's perfect pitch, and very few people have perfect pitch. It's like perfect recall, and both of those things are great to have if you're a musician. I have neither one of them. What I have is relative pitch. Like once I play in one note on my instrument, I know, like if I'm playing a tune that I don't know that everybody else is playing, I know how to find the notes to play because I've got that one note that I started from. So that's relative pitch. Perfect pitch is really the thing to have, but maybe 1 in 1,000 people have that. So
what about the recorder? Can you play the recorder, I guess?
Yeah, I can play the recorder. Yeah. A friend of mine and I used to play, we were both woodwind guys. We used to play recorder duets every Friday for probably 8 years, 9 years, And I have all, the East Indian flutes and glass flutes, and American Indian flutes. And I don't use them much anymore, but I have them,
Do you have the James Galway recorder? The large woodwind one? It's really like.
Actually, my best recorders, I have like really fancy wood recorders. Mech, Moeck. They are known to make the best recorders, but I find that the plastic ones play just as good, and they're more fun to play.
How about the tin flute? Do you like the tin flute at all?
The tin flute? I don't play that.
Oh.
No, it's there's kind of a limit.
Oh.
Everything is so time consuming. Like, just figure that I'm playing 4 instruments. I mean, it takes a long time just to keep those going. And like everything you adds like time to your life that you have to be doing that because you just don't pick them up and play them. I mean, you said, like, what about the violin? Well, it takes 50 years to learn how to play the violin. I don't have 50 years. It takes 50 years to learn how to play a clarinet right.
Wow.
Can you imagine? Like, I have 2 beginning students, and so because they're small people, you can't hand them a tenor sax. You have to send them an alto sax, which is smaller, but still. The alto sax is a little too big, so just for them to hold it is like 2 or 3 weeks of instruction, just so they can hold it without worrying about having it fall out of their hands. Mm-hmm. So then you get to like a note or two, and that takes another few weeks, And so it's really, especially in the beginning, it's a very slow process. The better you get, the faster the process goes. But in the beginning, it's excruciatingly slow.
Yeah, I can imagine when you first went out and buy all your instruments, like the oboe and the sax, and then suddenly you're trying all these sax, and suddenly, oh, the Eastman 850 alto sax, that's the one I'll get. And the 52nd Street soprano sax, that's the one I get. And the Haynes flute. Did you have to go through several of them before you decided to get those ones?
Yeah, you always play them a lot before you buy something, because there's a lot of good instruments out there. There's a lot of bad ones too. And just because if you buy any instrument, I don't care whether it's a Haynes flute or a summer saxophone or whatever it is, if you put 10 of them next to each other that are supposedly all the same, one of them will play much better than the rest of them. Why? I don't know. You know, maybe it was who was working on it that day. Maybe, the metal was better that day. There's so many variables in everything that we do that you have to get over the variables. And the same thing with mouthpieces. Like if I make 10 mouthpieces, no two mouthpieces are exactly the same. Even if you use a CNC machine, usually, especially if you use a CNC machine, because they might shake a little bit. The things, they're not as perfect as everybody thinks.
Does it take long to make one of those mouthpieces?
Uh, Sometimes, sometimes you just take it out and make a couple of moves and you play it. You say, "Oh man, how'd I do that?" Other times you work 2 hours and you end up throwing the thing in the trash can.
Oh, wow.
But like the companies that make the mouthpieces, like well, I don't want to say brand names, but any brand name, uh, they're going to sell every mouthpiece they make because they have to, because they're in the business of making money. I'm in the business of making mouthpieces, and I don't mind the money, but I don't have to sell 10 mouthpieces to make a living, because I've already made my living, so I can have fun with it.
That's true. Um, so you were talking about instruments that sound differently sometimes that you find elsewhere. Does the Eastman 850 alto sax and the 52nd Street soprano sax, do they have the same sort? Do they sound alike or sound different? And which one would you use mostly?
Well, it's completely different. Like if I'm playing classical saxophone, I play a Selmer. If I'm
Mm.
playing jazz saxophone, I play the Eastman, because that's what those horns want to do. Now, Eastman also makes a classical saxophone, which is kind of the 52nd Street. So on soprano, I would use that for classical music. So
I was looking at that 52nd Street. I know there's a Billy Joel song called 52nd Street. I wonder if that's a soprano sax they use in that song. I've wondered
probably,
why they could be.
probably
Could
not.
be.
Yeah, could
Um,
be.
Now you're not in the orchestra. Are you like hearing somebody else play a saxophone? Are you saying, "Hey, is that an Eastman you got there?" Or do you just, if you like the sound of someone else's sax, would you inquire as to what type of sax it is? Or would
Oh,
you?
absolutely. And then, if saxophone, woodwind sections are normally 5 people. And you just look, and because you've seen so many instruments, you know what they're playing. You know what mouthpiece they're playing just by the way it looks. But you don't know the size reed they're using. You don't know how hard they're working, and that's why, like when I make mouthpieces, a lot of people will say, "Well, just send me one. If I don't like it, I'll send it back." I don't know how they play. I don't know how loud they play. I don't know how much mouthpiece they put in their mouth. I don't know what size reed they use. I don't know where they play. I know nothing about them. So my deal is, if you want one of my mouthpieces, you have to come to my shop, and I have to watch you play.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, because that's the only way you can really tell what somebody's used to, and people usually won't go for something really radically different. So you have to kind of start where they're at, and then make the mouthpiece better for them. And a little bit is good. If you know that the mouthpiece they should have is completely different than how they play, they're not going to like it unless they understand that they're going to have to learn how to play that mouthpiece. So sometimes it's an incremental thing. Once in a while, I had a guy in my shop one day, and I handed him a mouthpiece, and he said to me, "I can learn to play that." Well, that's it. Are you willing to learn to play the mouthpiece, or do I have to make a mouthpiece that's just a little bit better than yours, so you think you got a
Wow.
better mouthpiece, but you're still playing not really the mouthpiece you should have. I mean, because if you're playing in a rock and roll band and playing through a microphone, that's a lot different than playing in a pit where everything, you got rugs, you got baffles, I mean, It's a completely different acoustical situation. So you have to consider, where they're playing, not only how they play, but where they're going to use the mouthpiece.
Wow.
It's so crazy that in certain symphony orchestras, instrumentalists will find a place in the hall where they point their instrument because they think it sounds better there.
Yeah, the acoustics, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Wow.
it's an amazing thing we do. There's always something to learn about it. Like first time I heard the guy say, "Well, I know I point my instrument there because it sounds better." Well, to him it does. I don't know if it does to the audience, but
Yeah.
that was a big thing for me to learn.
Yeah, it brought to mind when I was a kid. It was like you're you're lying down in bed, and we had a train station just up about 3 miles from the house, and sometimes we'd hear the train at 1:30 in the morning. Sometimes we hear the train at 3, and I always question, why does the sound of the train get higher, and when it leaves and it gets in the distance, the sound is lower? And I thought, must be like that with a symphony. So you're up at the balcony listening to an oboe, a trumpet, or violin, and then suddenly you're at an orchestra, and you're in the front of the, I guess you call them the no. Is that what do you the nosebleeds
There
of
is
the
a word
balcony?
for what you described
Yeah.
that I forget right now. There's a word for that. But usually, if you're in a concert hall or something, the room is acoustically built so that doesn't happen.
Oh wow, that's some sort of architecture right there. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
I mean, you can't get any architect just to make a music hall. These guys are specialists.
Did you find any difference to the music hall where you said this one isn't built properly? Would you know by the sound?
I've worked in a lot of pretty crummy music halls in my life,
Wow.
especially on the road. On the road every night you're in a different place, and you know, it's not like some of these rock stars. They have so much setup to do. They only can do one show a week, because it takes them 5 days to get all the pyrotechnics and all the sets up and everything like that. They come in
Wow.
with 4 big rigs, and have to empty them all and tear them apart and get to the next town.
That's the best. Wow. That's someone
Yeah,
who
with
loves
bands
their
I
music.
worked on,
Yeah.
we worked every night. We didn't, it was like just drive to the next town.
That's amazing. Wow. So tell me about the celebrities that you played for.
Oh, I can't even think. Uh, Sammy Davis, Sinatra, Lena Horne,
Sinatra.
yeah.
Wow.
Just anybody you can think of, I've probably played with, and yeah, people, Bryson, all kinds of people.
People, Bryson. Wow, that's a high accolade right there. What about Mercedes? Sorry, what's his name? Not Mercedes. Duke Ellington. Did you get a chance to play with Duke Ellington, or no? He might have been passed
No,
away.
no, but I have a funny Duke Ellington story.
Yeah.
We were all in this hotel, and I forget the city. It was the Stan Kenton band, the Woody Herman band, and the Duke Ellington band. They put us all on the same floor. So we just all opened our doors, and everybody's shaving, getting ready for work, and guys have towels wrapped around them and stuff. And we were walking from room to room, and bullshitting and having a good time. And the doors to the elevator opened up. It was like this, and there was this old couple in there, and they looked and they just went, and it closed. And we all cracked up. They'd never seen, like, this is a hotel we're staying in.
Wow, it's an amazing story, my friend. Wow, that's amazing.
There's so many road stories, man. It just getting started is a big thing.
That's amazing. Are you protective of your instruments? Like, would somebody say, "Oh, I don't have a flute or I don't have a saxophone. Can I borrow yours?"
No,
Is that
no,
a
they can't.
no?
I'll tell you a story about that. When I got my Eastman Jazz sax, it was the week before the NAMM show. That's the National Association of Music Merchandisers. And they were going to take these 3 saxophones to the NAMM show to show off their new product. They had just made them. Well, the one of the three I really wanted. And I said, I'll take that one. And they said, okay, well, we'll give it to you after the NAMM show. I said, well, no, it won't be the same horn. If everybody in town plays on it, you know, I mean, if you play with light fingers and some guy likes to grab the horn, you know, it doesn't play the same when you get it back. You know, so I mean, we're all that way. But you know, unless you know who's going to play your horn, like there's people I would trust playing my horn, and there's people I wouldn't let touch it at all.
Wow. Are you booked in advance? Like, how far in advance are you booked for shows?
I'm retired. You know, I mean, like I say, I just make records and write books and
okay,
do that kind of stuff. You know, when I quit the Cerritos Center, that was basically the end for me. You know, as far as working for other people. You know, so everything I do now is for me. I'm retired, and if I want to go out this afternoon and work on mouthpieces, I do that. If I want to practice, I do that. If I, you know, like when you're making a record, of course, there's days you have to go in and be prepared, and so you get prepared for that and go
there. You could be retired, but you're still presenting and producing the music of John Scott, though. Tell me about that.
Well, John Scott's, I met him doing movies for him, and he writes very easy music when we're doing movies, which is good because, you know, you're under the gun to get it done right. But boy, when he writes something for like a chamber music ensemble, it's like 6 months of practice before you can play it and make it sound right. You know, he's a lovely man. In fact, he's coming back to town. He has a house in England and a house in France and a house in Hollywood, right above the Hollywood Bowl. And he's 90 something. He always says he's 60, but you know. In fact, I better not say anything on this interview. He might get mad at me. But you know, I mean, he can outwalk me easily at 90 years old or 92 or however old he is.
Wow.
Because you know, in England, all they do is walk everywhere. He lives a block from Prince Albert Hall, so he doesn't even have a car. He doesn't own a car. You know, he just walks everywhere. You know, to go to the hospital, I'll walk. You know?
Wow, that's inspirational.
Yeah.
Okay, Mike, I got a scenario for you. Andre Bocelli is in town, and they lost their saxophone player, and they don't have anybody else. So, Mike, Andre Bocelli is going to be showing up tomorrow next day. Are you able to just suddenly drop everything and go?
Especially now, yeah.
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 So you prepared for a sudden call like in an hour from now, and they say we need you down here because Elton John needs a saxophone player.
But it usually doesn't happen that way unless some really big emergency comes up. Musicians know that if they're not hanging around a half hour before the show, the contractor is a very nervous person. You know, because it's not like football, like, oh, the right end is not here. Oh, well, we got 2 more waiting. We'll send one in. You know, if the chair is empty, it's empty. And if they have a solo, then it's really empty.
Yeah. Well, we really love your YouTube channel. You got the chromatic skill, you have the starting music file. Love it. And you have the camera just on 5 of you, like Nuages, Scherzo, Eugene Boza. We love your YouTube channel. Want to ask you, who would be I know that you played with several musicians, but who's your ideal musician, like the drop the mic type musician?
Well, I like some of the old guys. I mean, Stan Getz was my guy on tenor, and Paul Desmond was my guy on alto.
Yes.
You know, and listen, Kenny G.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The best trumpeter.
When he plays what he plays to make money, I don't like what he plays, especially. I mean, it's good. I can listen to it for 10 minutes and then I'm bored. But he is a serious musician, you know. And the same thing with Dave Sanborn, who really invented that style of playing.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, Dave Sanborn's the guy that made that kind of playing popular. And he too is a fabulous musician, you know, but they, you know, they figured out what the public wanted, fit in with that, and they make a lot of money doing it, you know. And I was never that smart.
Oh no, no, you're good in music.
I just went another direction, you know. I mean, we all have our path that we take.
Anybody else in your family who's musical?
Now, I grew up in front of a '78 record player.
Oh yeah, I remember those.
Little red light on it. My dad listened to Perry Como.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And that's what I grew up listening. I never had any help. You know, I know Tom Rainier. His dad was a saxophone player, and he made Tom learn piano early on. So Tom plays great piano, sax, flute, clarinet. He's great at all of it because he had that help from the beginning. You know, his just dad said, "No, you're going to do this." You know, I mean, I just kind of flubbed around. Well, should I go play football or should I practice? I don't know, you know.
That's excellent. Wow. So, Mike, who do you have playing in your Spotify or your CDs? Or what CD you like to pull out and put in the player and listen to? Do they all have to have saxophone?
Oh no, I listen to everything. In fact, right now I'm on a piano kick, a classical piano kick, and that's, you know, I'm buying 2-3 classical CDs of piano players every week now. And Andres Schiff is one of my favorite piano players, and I had done a series of 9 videos for a company called iClassical Academy in Italy.
Wow.
And, they just took him on as one of their teachers, and it made me feel like I really made it just because they hired him. You know?
Wow, these are excellent players that you just mentioned a lot, like Stan Getz, and wow, I'm familiar with them as well. So if someone comes up to you and said, Mike, I want to learn an instrument, they don't necessarily, I want to play the sax or I want to play whatever. They see you playing and they come up to you and say, I want to learn to play an instrument. What do I do?
It depends what age they are.
12.
If somebody's young, they should start on the piano. Even if they want to play the saxophone, they should start on the piano, because that's the basic instrument of all instruments that we play, because you can play 10 notes with, you know, at a time. And it gives, you know, I don't know what you know about music, but it's like the chromatic scale is of half steps. That's a very hard concept to teach kids, is half steps. You know, why isn't it a whole step? Well, no, because it's a half step, you know, because there's a black key in between the 2 white keys. So, you know, so if you can learn that by looking at your hands early on, the better chance you have of getting perfect pitch, because you're watching your finger hit that key and hearing what it sounds like, you know, and you're actually watching it and hearing it at the same time. So that's one advantage. And also that you can see your hands when you're learning the music. And so for somebody young that, like I say, might not even be able to hold an alto sax, I would say piano is your first instrument. If they're older, they usually come to me and they've picked an instrument already, or they played it in high school. And like, I have a guy that's 85 years old, that's one of my students.
Really?
He played clarinet in the Army band, then he was in the Postal Service for 40 years or whatever, and then
Wow.
then he decided he wanted to play again, and he didn't play too well, man, but I gotta say, he really wanted to play, and in 3 or 4 years we got him right up in the first section up there, you know. So it all depends on how old somebody is. If somebody comes to me that's 40 years old and says, I want to learn how to play the saxophone, they probably don't have enough energy to stay at it. You know, I mean, I've had that happen before, and they come for 2 or 3 lessons, and then they find out how much work it is, and they think, well, at this point in my life, I don't think I can put in that much work.
That's why you have to start young.
Yeah. You got to start young. I mean, you see all these guys on the late night shows. They're all young guys, and they all play great. The guy on Channel 2 at 11 o'clock, I forget, Steve Colbert. I mean, that band is ridiculous. You know, they all started really young.
Don't forget Doc Severinsen as well, from old Johnny Carson.
I worked with Doc's band a little bit, and he's the exception. You know, most trumpet players lose their chops about 65. he's still playing. He's figured a way to do it, you know. I remember the first time I played with them, it was at Cerritos College. You know, they come around and give a clinic and then play with the band, you know. And he could take a trumpet and just hold it up by the middle valve and play like a double high C, which is a big deal for
Really?
trumpet. Most of them
Wow.
like shoving it into their face, you know. And he just held up that middle thing. He goes, boop, you know, everybody goes, oh wow, you know.
Are you familiar with Richie Labamba Rosenberg, who played in Conan O'Brien's band? He was part of Bruce Springsteen's East band. We had him on a podcast, but um, he's still playing, and his family get together and they do like a Facebook, all the family playing instruments, and yeah, like I can't believe I see all these. I don't want to say older musicians, but musicians as yourself that have years and years behind them had to start when they were young. Like you're
Yeah.
right, I can't just suddenly say I want to learn the trumpet and pick it up and start playing, or the violin, but I do have an interest in taking. Like I've seen a lot of people play the bass. I like to learn how to play the bass at my age because it's all it is, just a guitar. You know, I
Well,
don't know if
right. The
that's
bass
true.
and the guitar are really good instruments for people well, I don't want to say anything wrong. Uh, they're I don't know. They're not. No, there's no easy instrument, but they're easier than the other instruments. You know, like because you can play the guitar by playing only chords. You don't have to be able to play Bach or anything. You know, I mean, there are guitar players that do that, but they're like us. They study. You know, they practice every day of their life, and you know, have to study hard. But to play strum, you know, and most rock and roll tunes are 4 or 5 chords, so you know that's not an issue. It's not like playing classical music. So it just makes it a little bit easier. It's a little faster road to get into music.
Yeah. Well, you're very inspirational, my friend. Have you ever taught anyone to play an instrument? Like, say, here, try this.
No, they come to me.
No.
I don't. I don't search people out. In fact, I I think with the way the changes are going in the music business, I wouldn't ever suggest to a student to be a professional musician, even though I've had some students that became professional musicians. But
Mhm.
you know, that was 20 years ago. Where there's, I mean, the whole thing's changing now. I mean, when I started, there was no synthesizers, none. You know, I mean, maybe at Bell Laboratories there was, but you know, you couldn't go out and buy a synthesizer for $100 and learn how to play. Now you can. I mean, things should, and so what's happening is now most TV shows are done with one person. They used to be done with 28 to 50 people. You know, all those studios used to have studio orchestras that were full-time jobs. Now they only call you if they have a particular project where they need you. So it's really changed, and the groups are getting smaller. And I don't think I have to answer that. That's my that's a phone note where I get all the junk calls. It's my office phone, but that's where all the junk calls go. I
Wow.
use my cell phone most of the time to get away from the junk.
Yeah. So I take it when you learn a classical piece, I've talked to a lot of, we had a lot of actors and actresses, and they tell me that they take scripts and they pull them apart. Do you do the same thing when you want to learn a classical piece? You take the notes and pull it apart and try to go deeper in this why I am playing this? That you just want to get an emotional feeling to it, or you just say, "Oh, I'm going to play this Chopin piece," and start to learn to play it?
Uh, Both. You start the
Okay.
Chopin piece and you start to play it, and you can play the easy things right away, and then you get to something hard that you can't play, and then you always have to start really slow so that your fingers. Uh, there's this guy Itzhak Perlman. He's a violinist, and
Mm-hmm.
the way he explains it, he says, "Think of a sponge and water." He says, "If I put the sponge in the water and take it out, there's some water in the sponge. But if I put the sponge in the water and I leave it there and I press it under the water for a long time, when it comes out, it's saturated with water." And
Mm-hmm.
music's kind of the same thing. You can learn it superfluously, or you can learn it like it's been in the water for an hour. You know, and that's what we want to do. We want to learn it like, you know, like it belongs to us. You know, like you don't even think about it when you play. You know, you're not thinking, well, what's the next note? I could be looking at somebody over there and still play it. You know, because it's so inside here and in here. It really has to be in the fingers more than the mind. The mind is just one spot in the way of getting it to your fingers. Once it's in your fingers, you have it. But if you have to think about it, you don't have it.
Well, you know, to tell you the truth, like that piece, Moonlight Sonata, like I like the first movement and the third movement. I have never heard it played on any other instrument but the piano. Is that possible to play on a sax?
Well, one line of it is, but like I say, you know, piano has 10 fingers. I got one note at a time I could play. So I could play the melody, and you know, the piano could go da da dee da da dee da, and then I play the melody. You know, but I can't do both.
So you have to get okay.
Every instrument has its own idiosyncrasies and its own difficulties. I think piano probably is one of the more difficult instruments, as are string instruments. But I mean, we all have, you know, like this piano player that I'm doing this Brahms record with. His part's really hard, and he's got a, you know, it should be. They say it's a sonata for clarinet and piano. It really should be a sonata for piano and clarinet because he's doing all the hard work. However, I mean, he doesn't have to worry about breathing. I got to worry about breathing. That's a huge thing. You know, like how much breath do you take? Where do you take it? Is it you take it in your back, in the back of your lungs, or in the front of your lungs, or the bottom of your lungs, the top of your lungs? And what do you do with your throat? Do you keep it open? Do you close it? What do you do with your tongue? You know, how far do you blow the note through the instrument? Do you play it all the way through the bell, or do you just play it to the note you're playing? I mean, you know, we all have these things that we have to kind of figure out. So that's why there's no easy instrument, because, you know, I mean, recorder probably easier, but you know, a classical recorder player would argue that with me.
Well, I'm pretty sure that if you really want to play Moonlight Sonata with a trumpet, you keep trying. You'll probably get it. It might be a while, but I'm pretty sure that if this, like for instance, yourself plays the sax or you play the flute, or anybody out there, piano you can play like Mozart, Chopin, Prokofiev, but Prokofiev on a sax or Moonlight Sonata, as we mentioned, on a flute, like it's uncalled for, because I've never in my life, unless I'm missing something here, I've never heard it played on a flute. But I have heard, yeah.
It can't be. And not sound like, you know, the piano version or anything near it, you know. Sounds like a person playing one note with another person playing 10 notes.
Yeah. Wow. I know you're retired, but when you do eventually play, or do you ever get to a point where you're like tired and you're like, okay, you're on the flute and I'm so tired? Or do you always have to be focused on the instrument you're playing? Like you have to get every note correct. What if you forget a note? Would you go back and replay it, or you just say, oh well, at least I played, I don't care?
Well, you can't do that if it's live. And if you're recording, you can go to record it again. I mean, the last CD I did, the players were so good that we did one or two takes all the way through, and we had the CD. So sometimes, you know, you go in, if the players are right, you might spend an hour or two on one tune. I mean, we did 6 tunes in 3 hours, you know, and just had a lot of fun doing it, you know. And then, like, you know, it's a funny thing. You see a piece of music and it says arranged by this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. Well, you know, 6 people don't arrange a thing. But like when we were playing, like nobody had to talk. Everybody just knew when to play. You know, like if you think, okay, I'm going to play a solo now, and somebody starts before you, you just stay out of the way, let them play. Yeah.
That's true. Everyone, if you look down below in the description, you'll see MikeVaccaro.com. Check out his website. Also, Mike Vaccaro too at Bandcamp, a lot of his music, and we will post his YouTube channel down there. And he's quite a prolific player. I get amazing. And he plays an Eastman 850 alto sax. I have to look that up and try to figure out. But that's amazing, Mike. I really appreciate. It's really nice meeting you. Really. Well, you make mouthpieces. That's. Do you have a link to that? Like, do you sell them online?
It's on my website. Pictures of I refurbish mouthpieces too, and you know that's another thing. It's getting somebody's mouthpieces replated.
And you're going to mention too also that people can sign on to a bi-monthly blog at MikeVaccaro.com, and you teach just a few students on clarinet, saxophone, and flute. It's limit 5 per week.
Or every other week. I have 5 students. Some of them come every week. Some of them come every other week. And you know, sometimes it has to do with cost, especially with younger kids. They'd rather go to the cheapest person than the best person. And what I say is, look, you're better off coming to me every 2 weeks than to go to somebody every 1 week that doesn't teach anything. So
yeah.
So I have some students that come every other week.
Okay, everyone. What's watching this? Mike, what's the one piece of advice you want to give to our audience who are thinking of taking an instrument, or what would you tell them?
Practice 1 minute a day. That's all you have to practice is 1 minute a day. And if after about 6 months you're not playing 20 or 30 or 40 minutes, then you shouldn't be playing.
Wow.
It has to charm you. What you have to do is you have to sit down. You have to take the instrument out of the case. Whatever you have to do to get it ready, put a reed on it, or put a bow on it, or whatever. Get ready, sit down, be quiet for a minute, forget about all the stuff that happened to you before the day, before the lesson, before you practice, and all the things that might happen to you after the lesson, and just be right where you are. Then practice your 1 minute and see where it takes you.
Now you're also past that 1 minute. You probably do 40 minutes a day now, or more, an hour even.
I do almost 3 hours every day.
There you go. That's everyone. That's when you're his age, but right at the moment.
I've done that for a long time. Music's kind of my religion. It's not just something I do. It's not about the money. I mean, it never has been. Even though you got to make money to make a living. I mean,
yeah, that's true.
Don't get me wrong, but it really has never been about the money. It's been about music and playing with other good players. The better you get, the more fun it is because you play with better players.
And you have to enjoy it too.
Yeah. And as Stan Getz says, if you want to get better, play with better players.
Oh, yes. Yes, that's exactly true. Yeah, that's what I want to ask you. Is every good boy deserves fudge? Is that archaic, or is that still the thing right now?
No, every good boy does fine. That's the name of the lines. FACE is the spaces between the lines.
So it never gets old. Okay.
No, it never gets old.
So E, G, B, D, F. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. I thought it was pretty archaic. I thought now because of AI and the way the software that you don't even need to worry about that now. But I guess it's still.
Well, so many people that are doing music now don't know music. They just know sounds. So a lot of the music isn't like you said, Prokofiev. Well, they never could write like Prokofiev, but they could get sounds that sound pretty together. They don't have to read music to do that.
Amazing. You're so inspirational,
Mike. The whole thing's changed. The whole music business has changed, and it's changing very, very quickly, and it will continue to change very quickly.
That's true. Yeah. And also AI, I hope it doesn't make musicians like you out of business.
We do too. That's what the writer's strike is all about.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah. And you also got the right hat too. The Mike Vaccaro hat.
Has a lot of things,
Awesome, Mike. I really appreciate your time, and thank you for being so generous and for talking to us. So we're going to end the stream, and we look forward to hearing some more music. And we got to figure out where we're going and to get your CDs are on your website as well?
They're on my website or bandcamp.com. Mike Vaccaro 2 at bandcamp.com. I'm soon going to sell them in Europe, and my whole thing is going to change. But you can always go to my website and hear the music.
Can't wait.
Chris, thank you, man. This has been a ball.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you very much. I had fun and so good to talk to you. And I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank
Okay,
you.
everyone, we're going to end the stream.